It was said Mary and Joseph travelled to Bethlehem to take part in a census. Well, we didn't have to travel so far. The 2022 Gibraltar census was the first to be carried out online. Forms were sent to each household, with everyone required to take part by law. The data was then collated and anonymised.
Before the census went online, you had a large team of civil servants who were recruited specifically for the census. They went personally to every single household in Gibraltar and delivered a census form that had to be filled in by the householder. Sometime after that, they would go round and knock on the door and ask for the completed form, which they would then check to make sure that all the information had been supplied.
At a predicted cost of £500,000, the data is extremely valuable to the government.
Is the Gibraltarian population aging? What implications does that have for the working population? If they're having to support more and more pensioners? Where are they living? In other words, are the schools in the right places? Is transport or the roads going to be adequate for where the population nodes and the concentrations are being seen to develop? So there's a lot of information for forward planning.
Censuses can offer a fascinating insight into aspects of a country's history. The first one recorded locally was in 1753. Back then, the population numbered less than 2,000 people.
Now, right through to the middle of the 20th century, there was a strong imperative on the part of the military authorities in Gibraltar to keep the population of Gibraltar down. Then, after the Second World War, things started to change. We then started to get housing for Gibraltarians being built in earnest. And therefore, the number of people in Gibraltar being able to live in Gibraltar has also grown.
Censuses are only released to the public 100 years after publication. I'm here in the archives. I've got my gloves on to protect this fascinating piece of history here, the 1777, what was then known as the Register of Inhabitants. Let's open it up.
It's a very important document because it actually shows the evolution of all the families as they migrated over to Gibraltar, and obviously it depicts the increase of population. It wasn't until 1881 where they were actually known as census records, and then obviously there would have been a census exercise conducted every decade thereafter.
Just look at this handwriting, it's beautiful.
Most of the writing from the 18th and 19th century do tend to have the same style and actually writing pattern, because they actually taught to write in a certain way so that it was very easy for everybody to read correspondence.
We've got here names, age, country, occupation, years in the garrison, and remarks. And some of these occupations are really interesting as well. We've got blacksmith, shoemaker, widow.
It tells you what was important at that time. In other words, knowing who was here and whether they had a permit, an official permit from the government of the day, with the governor. Because at the time, Gibraltar was a fortress, so in order to maintain the security of the fortress, you needed to know who was in it, where they'd come from, and therefore if you had anybody from countries that Britain was at war with, and therefore might potentially be spies. So very, very different sort of list from the kind of census that we have today.